As midnight approached, Lee Yeo-un stepped onto the nearly deserted platform of Wangsimni Station. His gaze lifted, and there she was, Shin Hae-in, a guitar case resting beside her as she waited for the same train. For him, this was a familiar sight, a quiet ritual played out in the late hours. Choosing to remain apart, Yeo-un positioned himself behind a pillar, watching her from a distance as they both awaited the train's arrival. From his seat on the train, Lee Yeo-un's gaze settled once again on Shin Hae-in. She was always carrying an instrument, and his mind began to wander, speculating about her life. Was she a music major, perhaps? An indie musician, or even a busker? His train of thought was shattered when she suddenly glanced in his direction. A jolt of alarm shot through him. He had been caught staring and worried that he must have come across as a creep. Trying to dismiss the hot flush of embarrassment, he resigned himself to the familiar, lonely conclusion that even though they saw each other often, he was the only one who was ever aware of it. Aboard the train, Lee Yeo-un decided to lose himself in the song Dark Planet by the obscure band Long Afternoon. He internally praised its flawless intro and verse, considering the track a work of perfection that the world had tragically overlooked. A wave of loneliness washed over him as he lamented having no one with whom he could share his passion for the music. His wistful train of thought was suddenly derailed when he noticed the sound had become muffled and poor in quality. Annoyed, he concluded that his cheap earphones must be malfunctioning, completely unaware that they were not connected and the song was, in fact, playing aloud for the entire carriage to hear. On the last train, Lee Yeo-un considered turning up the volume, thinking his music was just a bit too quiet. His focus was suddenly shattered by an annoyed male passenger shouting from across the car to get his attention. The man loudly complained that he could hear Yeo-un's music and demanded that he turn it down. A cold panic washed over Lee Yeo-un as he realized the horrifying truth: his earphones had never been connected to his device at all. As crimson-faced mortification consumed Lee Yeo-un in the wake of his music blasting across the train car, Shin Hae-in unexpectedly approached. She cut through his shame by asking if he liked the song, calmly identifying the artist as Long Afternoon. The recognition left him utterly stunned, his embarrassment instantly vanishing as he erupted with enthusiastic confirmation that he was a huge fan, eagerly asking if she was as well. Hae-in offered only a coy and understated acknowledgement of her interest. Wholly oblivious to her true connection, Yeo-un was simply delighted, launching into a heartfelt tribute to the band's incredible but tragically underrated sound, thrilled to have finally found someone who understood. With earnest concern, Lee Yeo-un lamented that the band Long Afternoon was not more popular, attributing their relative obscurity to a lack of self-promotion and interaction with their listeners. He confidently theorized that their music would explode in popularity if they were to perform live just once, stepping beyond the confines of their anonymous Instagram persona. As a marketing strategy, he suggested they would surely gain more fans simply by sharing aspects of their personal lives. This prompted Shin Hae-in to ask if he specifically thought the musician ought to reveal their face. Yeo-un paused, then clarified that while the devoted fan in him would love to see them, he ultimately respected the artist's decision to live a private life, exactly as they wished. With genuine admiration, Lee Yeo-un finished telling Shin Hae-in how much he respected her band's choice to be anonymous, confessing he was a fan of their mysterious concept. The atmosphere shifted instantly as she changed the subject, asking if he was aware they had run into each other on the train several times before. Caught completely by surprise, a silent panic gripped Yeo-un, and he made the desperate decision to play dumb, stammering a denial that he had ever seen her. But she confidently called his bluff, stating she assumed he knew, because she had noticed him always looking at me. The observation struck him like a physical blow, leaving him utterly shocked and speechless. While dutifully cleaning a table at the cafe, Lee Yeo-un was visibly and hopelessly flustered. His state did not go unnoticed by his boss, Ms. Oh, who approached and prompted him to explain just what had happened. Yeo-un's thoughts immediately flashed back to the pivotal moment on the train when Shin Hae-in had initiated their conversation. As he recounted the details, Ms. Oh's expression of concern slowly morphed into one of pure amusement. Finally, Completely overcome by the mortifying memory, Yeo-un buried his head on the tabletop, the mounting pressure culminating in an exaggerated scream of utter embarrassment. Upon noticing Lee Yeo-un's obvious distress, Ms. O initially assumed his agitation was over a bad customer review for the cafe. Her concern, however, was quickly redirected as Yeo-un erupted in a panic, desperately asking for her advice. He voiced his deepest fear, that she now thought he was a total stalker. A confused Ms. O asked for the full story, prompting a frantic explanation from the young man. After listening, she attempted to downplay his anxiety with a reassuring perspective, pointing out that for his crush to have even noticed him staring, she must have been looking at him, too. Despite her logical encouragement, Yeo-un remained trapped in his own worry, convinced he had only succeeded in coming across as a weirdo that lurks around the subway. With gentle logic, Ms. O sought to reassure the boy, arguing that if Hae-in had truly found him to be a creep, she surely would have altered her daily route by now. She urged him to simply talk to the girl again to resolve the uncertainty that plagued him. The advice landed, twisting Yeo-un's expression with conflict as he weighed her words. Seeing his hesitation, Ms. O pressed on, pointing out that his interest in the girl was obvious. Yeo-un could only offer a weak objection, insisting his feelings weren't romantic, before the dam of his anxieties broke. He justified his reluctance with a cascade of practical worries: graduating next year, the grueling hunt for a job, and the exhausting evening shifts he worked just to pay rent. Left dejected in the cafe, the sheer weight of his responsibilities settled heavily upon him. As their conversation pressed on, Yoo-o slyly suggested that Lee Yeo-un harbored a romantic interest in Shin Hae-in, a claim he defensively refuted. Flustered, Yeo-un clarified his intentions, insisting he only wanted to be friends with Hae-in so he would finally have someone to talk to about music. A knowing smile played on Yoo-o's lips as she remarked that wanting to be just friends was exactly how such stories always began. Before Yeo-un could process the jab, his boss cut the personal chat short, announcing that they had a customer's order. Her tone shifted to business as she directed him to make 2 strawberry smoothies and a lemonade, the unresolved tension hanging in the air as the focus pulled away to the building's quiet exterior. As Lee Yeo-un made his way through the city alone that night, his mind drifted to Shin Hae-in, wondering if their paths would cross again. A hopeful scenario played out in his thoughts: if she didn't hate him for the earlier incident, perhaps they could finally talk about their mutual love for the band long afternoon. Finding another fan was a rarity, a thrilling prospect that made the potential connection feel all the more significant. His gaze lifted toward the sky in a silent wish, hoping that she, too, was thinking of him and looking forward to the chance to speak again. Lost in this pleasant daydream, Yeo-un continued on his way. Frustration coiled in Lee Yeo-un's gut the moment he stepped onto the train platform. His usual bench, the very cornerstone of his plan, was occupied by a man fast asleep. With this simple obstacle, his perfect excuse to casually strike up a conversation with Shin Hae-in evaporated into thin air. Anxiety, cold and sharp, paralyzed him where he stood. Forcing an interaction now would surely make things awkward, potentially shattering the fragile connection they had managed to build. It was too great a risk. Defeated, he decided to abandon his plan entirely and simply wait for another chance in the future. Yet, just as the last of his courage deserted him, a voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. It was Shin Hae-in, calling out to him and asking if he intended to just stand there. Noticing Lee Yeo-un lingering on his feet, Shin Hae-in questioned why he wasn't sitting down, reminding him of the long wait for the train. A flustered Yeo-un offered the weak excuse that there were no available seats on the bench, a claim she immediately contradicted by gesturing to the empty space right beside her. Wordlessly, he took his place on the bench next to her and her guitar case. Sensing his apprehension, Hae-in gently reassured him that they would just sit together until the last train arrived, a simple statement that finally put him at ease. Lost in thought on the last train, Shin Hae-in's gaze fell upon the now empty seat beside her, prompting her to question the fleeting reality of the moment it was once occupied. A fragmented, emotional memory suddenly flashed through her mind, and her eyes dropped downward, her expression clouded with melancholy and conflict over the recollection. Yet, a clear, firm thought cut through the turmoil, but that was then, and this is now, solidifying this quiet decision. Her hand slowly clenched into a tight fist, a silent testament to a newfound determination. Within the quiet rumble of the train, after finding a spot to stand, Shin Hae-in broke the silence. She turned to Lee Yeo-un, asking why he was always traveling at such a late hour. He explained that he worked the closing shift at a cafe, which sometimes kept him later than planned. With keen insight, she correctly deduced that he was a college senior working part-time and remarked on how busy he must be applying for jobs. Turning the conversation back around, Lee Yeo-un then inquired if she, too, was out so late because of work. With a deliberately mysterious air, Shin Hae-in answered the unspoken question, vaguely describing her late nights as being spent with old men who possessed rather peculiar tastes. She leaned into the mischief, elaborating that she personally catered to their hardcore and niche preferences, a statement that sent a jolt of pure panic through Lee Yeo-un. His mind raced, wondering if he had unwittingly stumbled upon some dark, underground world he never knew existed. Just as his anxious imagination began to spiral, Shin Hae-in finally clarified that she was merely talking about a music studio, complete with rehearsal and recording rooms. Her true role, she explained, was that of a studio manager, often required to work deep into the night to accommodate clients like office workers. With a playful glint in her eye, Shin Hae-in teased Lee Yeo-un, guessing he listened to hardcore music. Flustered by her assumption and feeling he must look quite gullible, Yeo-un quickly denied it. Hae-in then shifted the conversation, asking how a busy student like himself had come across an indie band as obscure as Long Afternoon. Yeo-un clarified that he hadn't actively sought them out, explaining that his discovery of their music had been a complete coincidence. With a heartfelt expression, Lee Yeo-un recounted a vulnerable moment from his past when a terrible cold had left him completely bedridden. The oppressive quiet of his apartment, a consequence of living alone, amplified his profound loneliness. Desperate to fill the silence, he had put on some music at random. It was through that simple, aimless act that he first discovered Dark Planet by Long Afternoon. What began as a mere appreciation for the melody blossomed over time into a deep and abiding love for every single part of the song that had found him in his solitude. With unrestrained passion, Lee Yeo-un explained that he loved the band Long Afternoon because their lyrics felt like a profound reassurance, as if they were whispering that it was okay to let go. Shin Hae-in listened intently, her expression thoughtful as she carefully processed his heartfelt words. The conversation then shifted as Yeo-un turned the question to her, asking which of the band's songs was her favorite. After a moment of quiet contemplation, Hae-in tentatively named Dark Planet and In the Rising Tide as two she particularly liked. A brilliant spark of excitement ignited in Yeo-un's eyes at her second choice. In the Rising Tide, he exclaimed, the shared enthusiasm instantly forging a powerful connection between them. As Lee Yeo-un's enthusiastic praise for the instrumental skill of the band Long Afternoon filled the space between them, their journey was cut short by the intercom announcing the train's arrival. He seemed surprised that they had already reached their destination, so absorbed had he been in their discussion. For Shin Hae-in, however, the conversation lingered. She silently recalled a specific, insightful point he had made about the band's lyrics, a detail that went beyond simple fandom. Deeply moved by his genuine appreciation for the music she secretly poured her soul into, she told him with quiet sincerity that the band would be very grateful to hear his words. At Lee Yeo-un's request for her name, a visible hesitation took hold of Shin Hae-in. She took a long, thoughtful pause, weighing her decision in the silence between them. After a moment, she finally revealed her name, Shin Hae-in, but immediately followed it with a playful ultimatum for their future. He was now required to greet her first the next time they met, she warned, or she would resolve to ignore him forever. The sudden condition left Lee Yeo-un slightly flustered, yet a happy expression bloomed across his face in response. As the train pulled away from the station, Lee Yeo-un watched Shin Hae-in walk along the platform until she was out of sight. A soft smile graced his features as he later made his way home, his mind replaying their enjoyable talk. What a great person she was, he thought to himself. Spurred on by the pleasant memory, he resolved then and there to visit the bar round again in the hopes of another encounter. Yet, he remained blissfully unaware that he had not been alone with his thoughts. Shin Hae-in had been close enough to overhear his quiet praise, and she thoughtfully repeated his compliment to herself as he walked on. Amidst the gentle rocking of the train, Lee Yeo-un's eyes caught sight of a wallet lying on the floor, presumably having slipped from the pocket of a nearby passenger lost in a drunken slumber. A quiet concern settled over him. He couldn't just leave it there for someone to steal. He rose from his seat, picked up the fallen wallet, and with gentle care, tucked it safely back into the sleeping man's pocket. From her own seat, Shin Hae-in observed his every move. A soft smile touched her lips as she reflected on his simple act of kindness. He had gone completely out of his way, even risking the ugly misunderstanding of being seen as a pickpocket, and she found his silly, earnest nature utterly endearing. As Shin Hae-in walked away, her thoughts lingered on Lee Yeo-un. His recent act of kindness in returning her wallet had solidified her impression. He truly seemed like a good person. While her initial assessment of his character was now confirmed, she admitted to herself that she never would have expected him to be a fan of the band Long Afternoon. A memory then surfaced of him passionately praising their music directly to her, and with it came a startling realization. He wasn't merely a casual listener, he was a passionate and devoted fan. Lost in a private debate, Shin Hae-in wondered if Lee Yeo-un would like it, if he would be happy to learn that she was the musician known as Long Afternoon. Just as this thought consumed her, the train slid to a halt at a station. A drunk man stumbled out onto the platform, his wallet slipping from his pocket and landing on the floor, completely unnoticed. Without a moment of hesitation, Lee Yeo-un saw the forgotten item, quickly picked it up, and rushed off the train. Through the glass, just as the doors were closing, Shin Hae-in watched him successfully return the wallet to the man, getting a clear and sudden look at his truly kind character. As the dark stain of a spilled drink spread, so too did the disruption of the intimate mood between Shin Hae-in and Lee Yeo-un. In the quiet that followed, an internal monologue began to form within Hae-in as she convinced herself that the fans of Long Afternoon were only interested in the music itself. With this reasoning, she saw no need to reveal her identity to him. Her sole purpose, she decided, was to continue creating good songs. It was the musical persona, Long Afternoon, that should receive the love and attention, not the woman behind the name. Resolving her inner turmoil, she found she was perfectly content to remain as she was, anonymous. As she walked away after parting from Lee Yeo-un, a quiet resolve solidified within her. It was for fans just like him, she decided, that she had all the motivation she needed to keep creating the music she truly loved. Their session concluded, two men made their way through the music studio. While one's mind had already drifted to crafting the perfect Instagram post for their new creation, his friend was still lost in the sound, praising the quality of the track they had just laid down. At the front desk, the receptionist confirmed they were checking out of their room. The moment was fleeting, for as soon as they turned to leave, a phone call came in, and with swift efficiency, she booked that very same room for another client the following week. Inside her uncle's music studio, a man finally approached Shin Hae-in, confessing he had wanted to talk to her for quite a while. He hopefully asked for her phone number or at least her Instagram handle. With a polite, unwavering smile, Hae-in simply apologized and turned him down. As the suitor walked away, thoroughly dejected, his friend who had been watching from afar erupted in laughter at the swift rejection. At the music studio, a hopeful young man approached Shin Hae-in, but his advance was met with a clear rejection as she coolly turned away. From a distance, the man's friend let out a laugh at the failed attempt. Unbeknownst to them, another figure had witnessed the entire exchange from the shadows of a doorway, Hae-in's uncle, Hyun-sung Shin. He emerged and walked over to his niece, immediately questioning her decision to turn the suitor down. With a wry smile, Hae-in jokingly accused him of spying on her, but Hyun-sung brushed off the comment. Denying her accusation, he pressed the issue again, asking if the man simply hadn't been her type. With straightforward honesty, Shin Hae-in explained to her uncle, Hyun-sung Shin, that she had rejected the suitor because of her dislike for phone calls and, more importantly, her complete lack of interest in his band's music. Hae-in reacted with a flicker of mild surprise at her reasoning. Dismissing the matter, he told Hae-in to finish cleaning the room and head home, offering to handle the final closing tasks himself. Internally, she celebrated the chance to finally return to her own work. Her new song awaited. But as she was about to leave, Hae-in suddenly remembered something, stopping her in her tracks as he reached for a gift he had for her. Amidst the studio's quiet hum, Hae-in Shin held a gift-wrapped box as he spoke with his niece, Hae-in. He presented the small package to her, explaining that its contents were the trendy caramels currently causing a stir across social media. Hae-in accepted the gift and, in the same breath, asked her uncle if she could remain there to practice her guitar for a while. Hae-in simply looked on as she clutched the box, her gaze fixed on him as she awaited his answer. As Shin Hae-in departed the studio, Hae-in Shin's teasing voice followed her, wishing her a romantic trip home. Annoyed, she questioned his meaning before turning away with a weary sigh. Elsewhere, aboard a rattling train, Lee Yeo-un sat hunched in his seat, a profound exhaustion settled upon him. His mind was a heavy cycle of stress as he lamented how relentlessly busy he had been since the semester began, filled with a sharp regret for not having studied more over the break. Lee Yeo-un's attention was instantly captured by the gift box Shin Hae-in was holding. When she explained that she had received it because it was White Day, his gaze fell downward, his expression turning visibly dejected. Internally, he rationalized that it was no surprise she would be given such a present. He swiftly concluded that it must have come from a suitor, reasoning that it was only natural for someone as attractive and stylish as she was. Lee Yeo-un watched Shin Hae-in with the gift box, internally assuming it was just another token from one of her many admirers, a fact he tried his best to dismiss. To his surprise, she approached him directly. Commenting that studying must be tough, she suggested that some sweets might help him focus and then offered the box to him. A wave of confusion washed over him as he asked why she was giving it to him of all people. Shin Hae-in explained simply that she didn't like sweets and would otherwise throw the gift away, so she wanted him to have it. Even so, Lee Yeo-un hesitated, finally voicing his discomfort at the thought of accepting a present he believed was intended for her from another man. With a light laugh, Shin Hae-in clarified that the gift she was holding was from her uncle, given to her for White Day. The sudden realization of his mistake sent a wave of heat across Lee Yeo-un's face, and a surprised, embarrassed laugh escaped him. Shin Hae-in playfully seized the moment, teasing him for ever thinking she was regifting a present from another man. Desperate to change the subject, Lee Yeo-un quickly asked what was in the box. She explained that they were popular handcrafted caramels, a treat she hadn't yet tried herself, before extending the box to him. The sugar, she insisted, would be perfect for his study breaks. On the gentle sway of the train, Lee Yeo-un held the box of caramels, a quiet thought surfacing that he had never actually tried them before. He turned to Shin Hae-in, insisting she should have some too, noting that her uncle had put thought into the gift. She agreed with a light-hearted remark, explaining that her uncle would only get sulky if she didn't try any. But as he slid the box open, she didn't reach for one herself. Instead, she simply parted her lips, a silent request for him to feed her. A wave of flustered confusion washed over him as he asked if that was what she wanted. She explained plainly that her hands were dirty from working on her guitar, leaving the intimate request hanging in the air between them. With his hands completely full, Lee Yeo-un made a bold request, asking Shin Hae-in to drop a caramel directly onto his tongue. A brief hesitation held her back, but his firm insistence urged her to proceed. Leaning in, she carefully placed the small candy into his mouth, the intimate gesture lingering in the charged space between them. A sudden jolt of shock coursed through Lee Yeo-un as the flavor hit him, his reaction immediate and visceral. Concerned by his expression, Shin Hae-in quickly asked what was wrong, only for him to break the tension with a dramatic exclamation that the caramel was ridiculously sweet. A look of comic shock flashed across Lee Yeo-un's face the moment he tasted the caramel Shin Hae-in had given him. He quickly clarified his stark reaction, exclaiming just how intensely sweet it was. Shin Hae-in readily agreed with his assessment, describing the sweetness as almost painful. She advised him that pairing the confection with coffee or tea would help balance the flavor, a suggestion he accepted, admitting the sweetness was too much on its own. When she playfully offered him another, he simply laughed and declined. A comfortable silence then settled between them on the train as they sat, having shared the small, humorous experience. Lee Yeo-un awoke in his bed feeling as though he had barely slept at all. He dragged himself to his feet, the thought of breakfast seeming like far too much effort to consider. As his weary gaze swept across the room, it landed upon his desk, where a small box of caramels rested. He moved towards it and picked it up, a quiet confirmation passing through his mind, they were a gift from Shin Hae-in. The morning light found Lee Yeo-un just waking, stirring from within the comfort of his bed. He reached for one of the caramels Shin Hae-in had given him, and a sudden, sharp jolt of sweetness shot through him, shaking away the last traces of sleep. Deciding the caramels would make a perfectly acceptable breakfast, he grabbed his phone. His casual scrolling came to an abrupt halt as his eyes widened. A new post from his favorite band, Long Afternoon, greeted his screen, and a thrill of pure excitement instantly washed over him. Within the clamor of the busy cafe, Lee Yeo-un worked with a tireless energy, his voice cutting through the din as he called out a series of customer order numbers. With a bright disposition, he wished one patron a great day, his cheerfulness radiating from behind the counter. This buoyant demeanor did not go unnoticed by a coworker, who observed him for a moment before remarking that he seemed to be in a particularly good mood and asking if something good had happened. A sudden rush of pure joy coursed through Lee Yeo-un as he realized his favorite musician had finally posted an update on Instagram after a long absence. His mind immediately began to race with the possibility that a new song was coming soon, a thought so thrilling he was certain he wouldn't be able to sleep. His elation, however, was met with his coworker's visible disappointment. She confessed she had thought his sudden excitement was about a budding romance. She clarified she was referring to the girl you always run into on the last train, admitting she had been hoping for some progress between them. Suddenly flustered by the assumption, Yeo-un defensively denied having any romantic feelings for the girl at all. As his coworker pressed him for every last detail, Lee Yeo-un's mind drifted back. He confirmed that they had, in fact, formally introduced themselves, and his memory also brought forth a specific interaction from the past, the white day when she had given him caramels. This revelation launched his coworker into a feverish volley of questions, demanding to know who had initiated the name exchange and what had transpired immediately after. Slightly taken aback by the intense interrogation, Yeo-un stated the simple truth: he had told her his name and then asked for hers. His coworker relentlessly grilled him, prying to know if he had successfully arranged a dinner or drinks date with the girl from the train. Dejectedly, Yeo-un admitted that their conversation had ended without him even managing to get her name. The colleague expressed open disappointment, complaining that this meant there was no juicy drinking story to be shared from the encounter. Yeo-un pleaded with him to keep his personal life private, but the man only jested back, offering to trade gossip about his own divorce. Before another word could be exchanged, their conversation was cut short as the celebrity musician Hyun-ji-sung stepped up to the counter to place an order. At the cafe counter, the coworker processed a to-go order for a customer, Hyun-ji-sung, and dutifully informed him that his number would be called when it was ready. As the man stepped aside to wait, the coworker's gaze followed, a nagging sense of familiarity stirring within them. The customer's face was one they had seen before, they were certain of it. The thought continued to puzzle them, the memory of where they knew him from hovering just beyond their grasp. With a subtle gesture, Lee Yeo-un's coworker identified their customer as none other than the famous musician, Hyun-ji-sung. A wave of disbelief washed over Yeo-un as he truly looked at the man, the recognition hitting him with staggering force. He questioned what such a celebrity could possibly be doing there, only for his coworker to reveal the simple, shocking truth: Hyun-ji-sung was a regular. The nagging familiarity Yeo-un had felt finally clicked into place. He was left utterly astonished, grappling with the fact that one of the hottest musicians in the industry was a frequent visitor to their cafe. Just then, as the workers bid him farewell, Hyunji-sung made his exit, leaving Yeo-un reeling from the revelation. As the music of the band Long Afternoon played, the renowned musician Hyunji-sung listened intently. His mind catalogued the group's strengths with keen admiration. The songwriting was brilliant, the vocals possessed a truly unique quality, and their mysterious concept was flawlessly executed. A firm conviction formed within him. Thoroughly impressed by their artistry, he resolved to send them a direct message and propose a collaboration. Lee Yeo-un waited at the train platform, his thoughts consumed with a single, hopeful question: would he see Hae-in today? A spark of excitement ignited within him as he thought of the musician Long Afternoon's recent Instagram post, already anticipating the chance to discuss its hidden Easter eggs with her. He paused, reflecting on the simple pleasure of having someone to share the things he loved with. But as the train roared past and the platform emptied, Hae-in was nowhere to be seen. Standing utterly alone, the boy's hopeful expression soured as he realized with a familiar pang of disappointment that she hadn't shown up again. A weight of dejection settled upon Lee Yeo-un. He hadn't seen Hae-in since White Day, he realized, trying to convince himself she was just busy. The hopeful thought was fleeting, however, as a colder anxiety took its place. He began to question if she was actively avoiding him, his mind replaying his reaction to her last gift, worrying it wasn't what she'd hoped for. He spiraled into a familiar self-doubt, wondering if he was once again getting his hopes up for nothing. Just as that despair began to set in, he looked up. His eyes widened in pure shock to find Hae-in standing directly in front of him. A wave of relief washed over his features as he exclaimed aloud that he didn't think he would see her today. A playful question danced on Hae-in's lips as she met Lee Yeo-un, asking if he had been disappointed by the thought of not seeing her. Yeo-un studied her for a moment, an undeniable sense that something about her was different that day prompting him to ask if she was drunk. With a cheerful air, she confirmed she'd had a solo drink to celebrate. It was a well-deserved treat, she explained, because a project she had been working so hard on was finally wrapping up. A sincere congratulations came from Yeo-un, his curiosity piqued as he immediately asked what the project had been. As Yeo-un admired Hae-in's smile, a single thought echoed in his mind: she was so cute. Shaking off the daze, he mentally steeled himself, determined that this time, he would be the one to take the lead in their conversation. Eagerly, he brought up the new drawing their favorite musician, Long Afternoon, had just posted to Instagram. Yet, just as he started the topic, a stark announcement blared from the station speakers, declaring the train was now arriving. A sudden panic seized him as he realized his time had completely run out. There would be no chance for a proper conversation over the deafening noise of the approaching train. Panic and frustration churned within Lee Yeo-un as his mind raced through all the topics he had desperately wanted to discuss. At that very moment, Shin Hae-in, appearing slightly drunk and happy, approached him. She asked if he wanted to grab another drink with her, and the unexpected invitation left Yeo-un visibly shocked and utterly speechless. As he stood frozen, a station announcement declared the arrival of the last train, adding a sudden, immense pressure to his moment of indecision. The moment the invitation for a drink escaped his lips, a wave of instant regret and cold panic crashed over Lee Yeo-un. He berated himself in the sudden, roaring silence of his own mind, terrified that he sounded just like some sleazy guy hitting on her. Mortified, he began to apologize, to retract the clumsy offer entirely, but a gentle hand settled on his arm, stopping the words before they could form. It was Shin Hae-in. To his astonishment, she accepted, admitting that she, too, wasn't ready for the night to end just yet. His offer for a drink was met with her acceptance, and so their journey began. Lee Yeo-un and Shin Hae-in first walked side by side, their path eventually leading them onto a train. As the carriage rattled along the tracks, they fell into a quiet companionship, sharing a silent moment as they moved steadily toward their destination. Lee Yeo-un's heart hammered in his chest, a frantic beat that felt more suited to a middle schooler nursing his first crush. He quickly dismissed the notion, chalking up the feeling to the simple fact that it had been far too long since he'd last shared a drink with someone. Hae-in's voice then cut through his thoughts, asking where he lived. "Near main station," he replied. For his convenience, she thoughtfully suggested they drink near his apartment so he could get home easily. A flicker of concern crossed his mind for her own journey back, but when he voiced it, Hae-in simply declared she would take a taxi. With a confident air, she asserted her financial independence as a working woman. His immediate offer to cover her fare was met with a polite but firm refusal. She insisted she could handle it herself. A horrifying realization crashed down upon Lee Yeo-un as he stood awkwardly with Shin Hae-in in his apartment. He slept naked. His mind immediately began to spiral, a frantic inner monologue berating him for the catastrophic mistake of inviting her over. His desperate gaze darted across the space, taking in the shameful clutter, the faint smell, and the piles of unwashed laundry. Yet, his eyes locked onto what he internally identified as the biggest problem, the very bed he slept naked in. Overwhelmed by a suffocating wave of anxiety, a nervous sweat broke out across his skin. On his own turf, Lee Yeo-un confirmed they had arrived in his neighborhood, noting that his studio apartment was just a short distance away. With easy confidence, he suggested they visit a draft beer pub near the station that he had frequented before. Hae-in readily agreed to his plan, placing her trust in him to lead the way. Their walk, however, ended in disappointment as they arrived to find a stark for lease sign on the pub's door, a silent declaration that it had closed for good. As Lee Yeo-un and Hae-in arrived at their destination, their hopes were dashed. The pub had shut down. A flush of embarrassment crept over Yeo-un as he apologized profusely, flustered that his plan had so thoroughly failed. Hae-in was quick to reassure him that it wasn't his fault, but the words did little to soothe the internal panic that had taken hold. Yeo-un's mind raced, desperately trying to conjure another location, but he had to admit he didn't know any good spots nearby. Seeing him struggle, Hae-in gently interrupted his frantic thoughts with an idea, explaining that given the late hour and their lack of options, there was truly only one place left where they could still drink. With a single pointed finger, Hae-in suggested she knew a place they could go for a drink, and a wave of shock crashed over Lee Yeo-un as he realized she was gesturing toward his own apartment. Soon after, they arrived before his building. Once they were inside, a profound sense of relief washed over him as he thought about how his cleaning spree the previous week had saved him from the utter embarrassment of a messy home. Just as they began to settle in, however, Hae-in stated that she had a question for him. As they neared his apartment, Shin Hae-in voiced a sudden concern, declaring that she didn't want to arrive only to discover he already had a girlfriend. She then asked Lee Yeo-un directly to confirm he was single, explaining her desire not to be the bad person in a complicated affair. Yeo-un earnestly assured her that he was unattached. Visibly relieved and amused, Hae-in pronounced his answer perfect, satisfied that she could now drink in peace. With the tables turned, Yeo-un then posed the same question back to her, asking if she was also single so that he, too, could drink in peace. With a mischievous glint in her eye, Hae-in began to describe her supposed boyfriend, a musician named Lee Yeo-un. He was a great singer, she explained, but also a total brawler cursed with a truly bad personality. The confession landed heavily on Lee Yeo-un, whose face went pale. Completely taken in, the flustered young man questioned if it was a problem for them to be drinking alone together, his internal panic escalating as he processed the perceived threat of a violent boyfriend. Just as his mind spun with worst-case scenarios, Hae-in's serious expression shattered, and she burst into peals of laughter. It was all a joke, she clarified, a simple reference to Liam from the band Noasis. A raw shout of frustration ripped from Yeo-un's throat at having been so thoroughly deceived, as Hae-in could only manage a weak apology amidst her uncontrollable giggles. A palpable wave of relief washed over Lee Yeo-un as he finally confessed how much her joke had scared him, admitting the deep-seated worry that he had been wrongly pursuing someone already in a relationship. His gaze fixed upon her, intense and unwavering, as he declared with profound relief that no one's heart would have to be broken that night. Yet, even with her earlier assurance, a fragile thread of anxiety remained, compelling him to seek absolute certainty as he asked her one last time if she truly did not have a boyfriend. With unbridled excitement, Lee Yeo-un passionately laid out his theory for Hae-in, convinced that 4 specific items within a drawing of the character Yuk-in were a secret sign of a new song release in April. He elaborated with zeal, indicating a ukulele as clear evidence that the upcoming track would be acoustic. While he spoke, Hae-in privately acknowledged that the drawing held no such profound secret. Oblivious, Yeo-un gushed about the sheer joy he felt in discovering this clue and how much he was looking forward to the music. He turned to her, searching for validation, and received only a lukewarm verbal agreement in return. Internally, however, Hae-in knew the song was already recorded and, struck by his earnest speculation, found herself comically considering whether she should rush the release just to make his delightful theory come true. Amidst their conversation, Lee Yeo-un remarked that Hae-in's husky, gentle voice reminded him of the singer from the band Long Afternoon. Yet, in a testament to his intense fandom, he immediately clarified that the singer's voice was superior in his mind, possessing a quality that was even more fresh and crisp. Hae-in noted his deep love for the band, surprised they had managed to talk about them all night. A flash of worry that he had bored her was quickly dispelled when she reassured him she was having fun, admitting she preferred their light-hearted talk to getting overly sentimental or serious. Yeo-un enthusiastically agreed, and they discovered a shared connection, bonding over their mutual dislike of heavy conversations while drinking. Lying comfortably, Shin Hae-in encouraged Yeo-un to continue with his monologue. He protested, however, expressing his concern that she was about to drift off and joking that he wasn't performing ASMR. Hae-in met his worry with a challenge of her own, questioning what would be so wrong if she did, in fact, fall asleep. She then intensified the flirtation, pointedly asking what would happen if she were to fall asleep right there on his bed, creating a sudden and palpable moment of charged tension between them. In a staggering moment of pure shock, Lee Yeo-un processed Hae-in's audacious proposal. The suggestion that they should go to his apartment for a drink left him reeling in disbelief. As his mind tried to catch up with her boldness, an astonished question tumbled from his lips, the words laced with uncertainty, "Can I do that?" Lee Yeo-un stared in utter disbelief at Hae-in's audacious proposition to stay the night at his place. Seeing his shock, she playfully challenged his surprise, a teasing glint in her eye as she asked if she was not allowed. Completely flustered, Yeo-un could only stammer out a question, desperately wondering if she was just joking with him again. With a cool confidence that left him breathless, Hae-in turned the tables, declaring that whether she was joking or not was a matter that his own response would ultimately decide. Hae-in presented him with a startling ultimatum, framing the situation with 2 simple outcomes. If he told her to leave, their connection was merely a joke, but if he asked her to stay, she was being deeply serious. She then directly asked him to choose, placing the responsibility of defining the moment squarely upon his shoulders. A heavy silence descended as Lee Yeo-un's initial shock gave way to a profound, contemplative stillness. He wrestled internally with the immense weight of her question. After the moment of struggle passed, he met her gaze, his decision finally made. With an earnestness that cut through the tension, Yeo-un confessed that he hoped she was being serious, an invitation that beckoned her to stay and irrevocably escalated the intimacy between them. With the night still young and more to discuss, Hae-in suggested she stay over, as she had the following day off. Yeo-un readily agreed to her proposal, but the amicable mood was shattered in an instant. His eyes widened in shock as he saw Hae-in starting to take off her pants, and a panicked yell erupted from him. Completely unfazed by his outburst, Hae-in calmly clarified her intentions. She was simply unbuttoning them to get more comfortable, feeling bloated from the drinks they'd had. With a considerate gesture, Lee Yeo-un offered to lend Hae-in some of his clothes, an offer she happily accepted. He specified that he had a freshly washed set of sweats for her, though he noted they might be a bit large. Just as she finished the last of her drink, they both realized their supply of beer had run out. Yeo-un immediately volunteered to go to the nearby convenience store for more, suggesting that Hae-in could use the time he was gone to change into the comfortable sweats he had laid out. In a gesture of hospitality, Lee Yeo-un asked Hae-in if she needed anything, offering the simple suggestion of a toothbrush. She initially declined, stating she had most of her necessities packed in her bag. A moment later, however, a thought struck her. She turned back to him and calmly asked if he could buy her some sanitary pads, explaining that her period was due to start. As if it were the most normal request in the world, she reassured him that any brand would be fine and that she would pay him back. The sheer, unexpected intimacy of the errand left Yeo-un utterly speechless, his mind blank and a hot flush creeping across his features. Standing amidst the brightly lit store aisle, the purpose of his errand finally dawned on Lee Yeo-un. Hae-in had sent him to buy sanitary pads. A cold panic immediately set in as he admitted to himself that he had never purchased them before and had no clue which kind to choose. He knew he couldn't possibly go back and ask her for specifics, leaving him stranded with the decision. Just then, his attention drifted to a different shelf, and a deep blush crept across his cheeks as he became visibly embarrassed by the other products. Lost in a distracting thought, he was forced to mentally scream at himself to snap out of it and get a grip. Lee Yeo-un admitted to himself that the thought of physical intimacy with Hae-in had crossed his mind. He immediately quashed the impulse, resolving not to act on it for fear that he would screw things up by rushing. The memory of a past failure surfaced, a time he had gotten ahead of himself only to be left behind, and he was determined not to repeat it. His gaze softened as he looked at the sleeping Hae-in, a wave of simple contentment washing over him. Just having her there brought him a genuine sense of happiness. And yet, despite his earlier resolve, his mind began to wander, fantasizing about what he would do if she were the one to initiate something that night. Lee Yeo-un stewed in a quiet frustration, his body's own startling reaction making it impossible for him to even stand. After some time had passed, enough to cool off and run a quick errand, he returned to his apartment, a convenience store bag rustling in his hand. He called out to Hae-in as he entered, announcing he was back. The silence that met him was absolute. He soon found her, not waiting, but fast asleep on the floor. As he gazed down at her peaceful form, his earlier turmoil gave way to a gentle, affectionate smile. Watching over her, Lee Yeo-un realized that Hae-in had finally succumbed to her exhaustion and fallen fast asleep. A quiet concern surfaced. He decided to cover her with a blanket, a simple gesture to prevent her from catching a cold. As he leaned carefully over her still form, a hand suddenly shot out from beneath the covers and gripped him. Before he could process the movement, she pulled him down onto the bed with surprising force, sending a jolt of pure panic through him as his mind scrambled to understand what on earth she was doing. As Lee Yeo-un kept a watchful eye over her, the silence was suddenly broken by Hae-in's voice, though she appeared to be sound asleep. She murmured that he was so handsome, the unexpected compliment catching him completely off guard. Her sleepy praise continued as she added, "Totally before her words trailed away, leaving the thought unfinished. A deep blush spread across Yeo-un's face as a bead of sweat formed on his temple, his composure completely shattered by her outburst. Stunned and uncertain, he could only question internally if she had just been talking in her sleep. The warmth of Hae-in's breath, her sheer proximity, had nearly broken Lee Yeo-un's self-control. He knew, with a dangerous certainty, that if she had held on to him any tighter, he would have been utterly unable to push her away. While a rational part of him acknowledged that kindness did not always lead to a relationship, he simply could not stop himself from wanting more from her. As dawn cast its first light upon the apartment building, the night's unresolved tension gave way to the sunlit interior, heralding the arrival of the next morning. Lee Yeo-un's eyes fluttered open to an empty bed, and a sharp pang of regret shot through him. He should have just slept on the floor. Pushing himself up, he began to look for Hae-in, a quiet question of her whereabouts forming in his mind. His gaze then fell upon the living space, where he noticed the beer cans they had left out were gone. A flicker of surprise, followed by a warm sense of gratitude, washed over him at her tidiness. That fleeting warmth, however, was instantly extinguished by a sudden, cold thought that connected her cleaning to the rest of the trash in the apartment. The full implication crashed down upon him, and he froze, his face a mask of sheer, unadulterated terror. Alone in the quiet of his bathroom, Lee Yeo-un stood with a single condom resting in his palm. He tried to rationalize that he probably wouldn't even need it, attempting to convince himself that their night was simply for drinks and talking. He further assured himself that Hae-in wanting to stay over hadn't been a suggestion for anything more intimate. And yet, a conflicting, impulsive thought suddenly cut through his careful logic: it was always better to be prepared, just in case. Lee Yeo-un stood frozen, desperately trying to convince himself that he had no regrets. The forced bravado was fleeting, however, crumbling away in an instant as his expression twisted into one of dawning horror. A terrible certainty washed over him: Hae-in had seen the discarded item. She must be completely freaked out. As his thoughts began to spiral, an intense panic took hold, rendering him utterly speechless and rooted to the spot in pure terror. Within the quiet confines of his room, Lee Yeo-un wrestled with his anxious thoughts, acutely aware that Hae-in, the person he liked, was sleeping just beyond the door. After finally steeling himself for the morning ahead, he slid the door open, only for his heart to plummet. The living room was empty, the futon where she was supposed to be, completely bare. A sudden voice from directly behind him made him flinch. It was Hae-in, her tone alarmingly serious as she declared, "We've got some things to talk about, don't we?" A wave of pure panic washed over Lee Yeo-un as his mind desperately scrambled for something, anything, to say. His first thought was a lie about needing the item for a class marketing report, but he instantly discarded the notion as useless. A second, equally flimsy excuse surfaced, that it was a good luck charm for acing his exams, and was just as quickly rejected. His frantic thoughts finally landed on a third, far more absurd possibility: he had simply mistaken the object for a case of vitamins. A look of profound shock settled on his face, a mask for the chaotic storm of implausible excuses raging within him. A quiet resolve settled within Shin Hae-in: to lie about her recent actions, she decided, would be utterly pathetic. Just as Lee Yeo-un began to speak of the previous night, she swiftly cut him off, asking if she could go first. After he agreed, she took a steadying breath and began to preface the decision she had made, a choice that would define their relationship, at least for the time being. With a sudden clarity, Shin Hae-in announced to Yeo-un that she was going to put some distance between them. She quickly clarified that this wasn't about a single tipsy incident, but a recognition of a larger pattern where she had been way too casual with him. Her behavior, she explained, stemmed from an unconventional upbringing surrounded by her uncle's bandmates, an environment that had blurred the lines between music and friendship and left her unaccustomed to clear boundaries. And so, she concluded, she needed to take a step back in order to finally determine what the appropriate line between them ought to be. Sensing the source of her discomfort, Lee Yeo-un silently wondered if Shin Hae-in's mood was about the condoms she had bought the previous night. He decided to voice his suspicion aloud, confirming her unspoken worry by stating that he reckoned she might be stressing over it. He quickly reassured her that while the act had certainly surprised him, he wasn't bothered in the slightest, chalking it up to the drunken atmosphere of their evening. Normalizing the incident, he acknowledged that they were both consenting adults, though he did admit to being slightly taken aback at the implication that she would consider a one-night stand. Hae-in immediately blurted out an apology, insisting she had not invited him to drink with that intention. In response, a light laugh escaped Yeo-un, a clear sign that he understood and accepted her explanation, and with that sound, the last of the tension between them completely dissolved. Shin Hae-in finally clarified her troubling words, explaining that her fear of having crossed a line was not about what he might have assumed, for as she stated, nothing happened in the end. The true, agonizing source of her distress was far more personal. She confessed that she had absolutely loathed herself for her conduct that day. A surprised Lee Yeo-un pressed her for an explanation, asking just why she had felt such profound self-loathing. Rather than recount her embarrassing behavior, Hae-in simply urged him to reflect, to think back on all the things she had done to him, implying the reasons for her shame should have been perfectly clear. The weight of her actions pressed down on Shin Hae-in as she confessed her transgressions from the previous night. She recounted how she had barged into Yeo-un's home, borrowed his clothes, and even slept in his bed while he was relegated to the couch. Describing herself as an inconsiderate mess and a nightmare of a guest, her words brought a look of surprise to Yeo-un's face as he finally understood the true source of her anguish. Hae-in explained that the crushing guilt had only set in after she sobered up, which was why she had fled without so much as a goodbye. At last, she offered him a sincere and heartfelt apology for her behavior. Lee Yeo-un had always regarded Hae-in as a cool and confident individual, someone completely unconcerned with what anyone else thought of her. The sight of her now, racked with guilt and embarrassment, was such a stark contrast to that image that he had to physically stifle his own laughter. Wholly unaware of his internal amusement, Hae-in explained her wish to put distance between them, confessing a fear that she might repeat her drunken behavior if they stayed too close. As a first step, she suggested she would stop visiting the station for a while. A spark of excitement ignited in Shin Hae-in as she shared the news that the band Long Afternoon might be releasing a new song. She admitted that it was Yeo-un she wanted to talk about it with, but this very desire led to a sudden confession of her deepest concern. Hae-in voiced her fear that if they were to keep hanging out, she would end up being a total mess. As proof, she had only to remind him of her recent drunken behavior, a moment of uninhibited passion he had already witnessed. In response to her deep-seated concerns, Lee Yeo-un emphatically insisted that he was fine with her behavior. He elaborated further, assuring her that he could handle anything she believed was rude or inconsiderate, specifically mentioning everything from her playful jokes to her drunken antics. His confident tone then softened into a vulnerable plea as he begged her not to pull herself away from him. Hae-in remained perfectly still, her silent, emotional reaction hanging in the air as she took in the weight of his words. A series of messages from Shin Hae-in lit up Lee Yeo-un's screen, her words confirming their plans to drink together again the next time she visited. Yet, her follow-up message gave him pause. She told him to hold on to something he had bought the last time they were together, hinting that they might need it soon. A profound confusion settled over him as he racked his brain, trying desperately to recall what it was she could possibly be referring to. As Shin Hae-in walked away from the building where she had left Yeo-un, her steps came to a halt. She paused, glancing back over her shoulder as a single, self-deprecating thought surfaced with absolute clarity. The beer, duh. A slow smile then began to grow on her face as she turned and continued on her way. A profound sense of relief washed over her. She had worried for nothing, as Yeo-un hadn't seemed weirded out by her at all, proving all her anxious concerns had been completely unfounded. Alone in the quiet of her room, Shin Hae-in reflected on the fact that Yeo-un was okay with her actions. He didn't seem to dislike her, yet that small comfort was immediately swallowed by a wave of immense regret. A fragmented, intense memory of the night in question flashed through her mind, so vivid it caused her to physically cringe. Berating herself aloud, she worried that she had come across as a desperate pick-me girl. Her thoughts spiraled deeper into a mortifying abyss, wondering what might have transpired had she not thankfully fallen asleep. Completely consumed by the overwhelming embarrassment, she finally buried her face deep into her bedding. The soft glow of her phone cast upon Shin Hae-in's stunned expression as she read a text message from an unknown number. The sender introduced himself as Hyunji-sung, a fellow musician who claimed to be a fan of her work and wished to discuss a potential collaboration. A jolt of pure shock coursed through her. Overwhelmed, Hae-in buried her face in her hands, her mind reeling as she silently questioned just what was happening. In a desperate attempt to process the unbelievable turn of events, she resolved to cling to her routine, deciding a simple shower and a review of a melody she had recorded earlier were the only things that could ground her. The glow of her phone illuminated Shin Hae-in's face as she read the message, her thoughts racing as she questioned if it could genuinely be from the person she suspected. Her eyes widened, her breath catching as she stared, processing the absolute shock of the words before her. The text was clear, sent from Hyunji-sung himself, who expressed a deep admiration for her music and then directly asked to discuss a potential collaboration. Her silent astonishment finally broke, and she verbally confirmed the impossible, the name of the renowned musician escaping her lips in a whisper of pure disbelief. Under the banner of someone who likes to practice guitar, the night found Shin Hae-in walking a solitary path along the sidewalk. Her steady footsteps faltered and then stopped completely, frozen by a sudden, jarring realization. A memory from the day before surfaced with startling clarity. A direct message had arrived from the famous musician, Hyunji Song, and she had never sent a reply. Shin Hae-in was lost in a spiral of indecision, endlessly replaying how she had overthought the direct message from Hyunji Song and ultimately failed to respond. The famous musician's words had been direct, praising her music and proposing a collaboration. Even now, the internal debate raged on. While a part of her admitted the experience would be fun, the weight of the offer left her stressed and unable to make a choice. Her thoughts were abruptly interrupted by her uncle, who entered the room and asked if she was still practicing. Pulled from her reverie, Hae-in replied that she was just about to finish. Her uncle then cheerfully suggested they share a delivery dinner of hellfire tteokbokki, an invitation that brought a look of clear hesitation to her face. Before Shin Hae-in sat what her uncle proclaimed was the ultimate cure for stress, a steaming plate of tteokbokki. He urged his distracted niece to eat before the food grew cold, but his voice barely pierced the fog of her thoughts. Hae-in's mind was a world away, fretting over the collaboration offer she had received. A decision had to be made soon. It felt rude to keep the other party waiting any longer. Completely misreading her turmoil for a lack of enjoyment, her uncle leaned in, asking if the dish was too bland and jokingly offering to get a spicier version. With a heavy heart, Shin Hae-in finally revealed to her uncle that the renowned musician, Hyunji Song, wanted to collaborate with her. Her uncle's face immediately lit up with excitement, proclaiming it an amazing opportunity without a moment's hesitation. Hae-in, however, could not share his enthusiasm, explaining that the entire situation felt far too sudden. Confused by her reluctance, her uncle probed further, asking if some unreasonable demand had been made. Hae-in quickly clarified that the offer was perfect. Her true concern was Hyunji Song's overwhelming public profile. She confessed her deepest fear, that a collaboration of this magnitude would inevitably drag her into the spotlight, destroying the anonymity she had worked so hard to protect. He confirmed it then. Hae-in's deepest anxiety about the collaboration was the fear of her face being recognized. An impulsive thought surfaced, a simple wish that he could just tell her to be bold, to own it. But he immediately reined himself in, realizing he could not say such a thing so easily. His mind drifted to the pain he knew she had endured, recalling the scars from her past that were the true source of his empathy and the reason for his restraint. Her uncle acknowledged the pain she still carried from her past, expressing his heartfelt desire for her to finally spread her wings. He praised her as an exceptionally talented artist before advising her to meet with Hyunji Song to talk things over instead of worrying by herself. He reasoned that as a fellow musician, Hyunji would understand her position and might even be able to help her sort through her feelings. Emphasizing the networking value of such a meeting, he stated that even if she decided not to collaborate, it was still a great chance to connect. He then jokingly suggested that she could at least get an autograph and use the new connection to promote their own studio. An accusation, sharp and bitter, echoed in Shin Hae-in's mind: false advertising. Her original plan for the day had been simple, to work on the intricate guitar line for a new song. That intention, however, was now completely forgotten. Her thoughts trailed off, having been utterly sidetracked by a consuming preoccupation with the very nature of celebrities. Lost in thought, Shin Hae-in pondered how famous musicians managed to handle the immense pressure of public attention. She questioned the sheer amount of courage it must take to withstand that kind of scrutiny, wistfully wishing she could borrow just a sliver of that confidence for herself. Her quiet reverie was suddenly broken when Lee Yeo-un asked what she was doing. He then explained that he had attended a career fair earlier that day and was simply reviewing some of the interview coaching tips he had learned. A question from Shin Hae-in cut through the low rumble of the last train as he asked about the strange faces Lee Yeo-un was making. Yeo-un explained that he was simply practicing a natural smile for an upcoming interview. Intrigued, Hae-in requested to see the interview prep brochure, expressing his surprise at its detailed contents. Seizing the moment, Lee Yeo-un proposed they try a practice exercise from the booklet together. He then read the first instruction aloud, to speak without breaking eye contact with the interviewer, and with that, the mock interview had begun. Aboard the late-night train, Lee Yeo-un laid out the rules for an impromptu practice interview. He would sit apart from her, posing questions she had to answer, all while never breaking his gaze. A wave of reluctance and embarrassment washed over Shin Hae-in at the thought of such a public exercise. Gently, Lee Yeo-un reassured her by pointing to their surroundings. The train was nearly deserted at such a late hour. Finally convinced, she relented, urging him to get it over with quickly. His enthusiastic confirmation sealed their pact, and the two prepared for the mock interview to begin. Shin Hae-in's gaze settled upon Lee Yeo-un. Although she hadn't known him for long, she could clearly read the serious expression he wore. It was the look of someone giving their absolute best effort. For a fleeting moment, she pictured him in the actual interview, maintaining that same firm and determined look. Breaking from her internal thoughts, she decided on what to ask. With a renewed focus, Hae-in officially began their mock interview, posing the first question. With their mock interview game in full swing, Shin Hae-in ventured an inappropriately personal question, earning an immediate objection from Lee Yeo-un. The pretense of formality dissolved into playful banter as they jokingly disqualified each other, trading light-hearted accusations of creating a toxic workplace. Deciding he had earned a prize for his participation, Hae-in offered him an interview fee. She presented him not with money, but with one of her own personal guitar picks, explaining that the small token was far from ordinary. It held, she confided, the intense energy she poured into every single one of her music practices. While seated on the train, the memory of the mock interview he had practiced with Hae-in suddenly struck Lee Yeo-un. In response to their conversation, Hae-in earnestly promised, "I'll make sure to bring it with me." The unexpected statement caught Lee Yeo-un by surprise, and an awkward tension instantly hung in the air between them. Overcome by a shared wave of fluster, both simultaneously turned their heads to look away from one another. On the late-night train, Shin Hae-in sat lost in thought, her mind consumed by the impending interview with Hyun-ji-sung, all while Lee Yeo-un watched her from the adjacent seat. His voice suddenly cut through her contemplation, asking if she happened to be thinking about an interview. A jolt of shock coursed through Hae-in as her thoughts spiraled into panic. Did he recognize her? Was this stranger about to ask for an autograph? But his next words were not what she expected. He clarified that it was he who had an interview coming up and, to her astonishment, asked if she would be willing to help him practice. Shin Hae-in was left completely taken aback, stunned by the unexpected and lengthy request from a man she had never met before. Hae-in Shin arrived at the building for her scheduled meeting, pausing with a flicker of uncertainty as she tried to recall which floor the studio was on. Her hesitation was brief, for the producer soon found her in the hallway, his expression clearing with recognition as he confirmed she was the musician known as Long Afternoon. They exchanged a quick, polite laugh about the difficulty of finding the location, but the pleasantries soon gave way to a moment of confusion. The producer glanced past her into the empty corridor and asked why she was by herself, a single question that revealed his mistaken assumption. He had been expecting an entire band, not a solo artist. With the initial pleasantries exchanged, the producer sought to clarify a key point, observing that Long Afternoon was, for all intents and purposes, a one-person band. Hae-in affirmed his assessment without hesitation. Satisfied, he gestured for her to follow him, inviting her inside the studio to continue their discussion. As they made their way in, he broached the subject of her name, asking what he should call her. It was then she revealed her true name, Hae-in Shin, leaving the choice of which to use entirely to his comfort. The producer made his decision, settling on the more familiar Hae-in and thus establishing the terms on which their meeting would begin. Leading Hae-in down a hallway, the producer explained that with the company's meeting rooms under renovation, they would have to use his studio. This was more convenient anyway, he added, as he could play a demo for her there. As they walked, Hae-in asked if he owned the entire building. The producer clarified that he only leased a few offices for now, but he expressed a sincere hope that his new label would one day become successful enough to purchase the whole property. Upon the producer's grand announcement that he was starting his own label, Hae-in offered only a flat, verbal observation in return. This was not the impressed reaction he had anticipated, and a cold worry began to fester within him. Her lack of a positive response, he feared, could only mean that she was not interested in what he was building. With a heavy heart, he concluded that this meeting was not going to be easy. Yet, a world away from his anxious assumptions, Hae-in's internal monologue told a different story. She was simply exhausted, having stayed up the entire night writing, and her only true desire was to finish their business quickly so she could finally go home to rest. The producer's offer of a drink, a simple gesture to begin their meeting, was swiftly declined by Hae-in Shin. She insisted they proceed directly to the matter of the collaboration. Obliging her businesslike approach, the producer presented the contract and invited her to voice any questions she might have. Hae-in immediately confirmed that she did, in fact, have a question regarding their proposed work together. Hae-in Shin voiced her apprehension, asking if the collaboration would require her to reveal her identity and engage in live promotions. The producer immediately reassured her, explaining that the decision to remain anonymous or to go public rested entirely in her hands. He then clarified that his primary motivation for reaching out had never been commercial success. Instead, he confessed, he genuinely wanted to introduce a talented artist like her to a much wider audience. With the demo prepared for their collaboration, the producer asked Hae-in if she was ready to listen. A quiet tension within her finally eased. She had been fully prepared to reject his offer if it had required mandatory live performances. To her immense relief, however, he was surprisingly chill about her preference, alleviating her primary concern. As this realization settled, the producer moved to his equipment, setting it up to play the track. The producer's fully produced demo track filled the studio, its polished sound playing out for Hae-in Shin. After listening, she abruptly cut the music, plunging the room into a heavy silence. Her voice sliced through the quiet as she questioned if this so-called collaboration was merely a request for her to be a vocal feature on his track. While Hae-in clarified that she liked the song, she firmly asserted that a genuine collaboration must also be infused with her own distinct musical style, not just her voice. With an air of unshakable confidence, Hae-in Shin took her place at the producer's workstation. She declared her intention to start deleting unnecessary tracks, immediately overriding his suggestion to simply mute them instead. He protested, mentioning the sleepless nights he had poured into the project, but she ignored his pleas. The tracks were permanently erased as she stated there was no room for second thoughts. Inwardly, however, she understood the true weight of her actions. The producer's song was already so exceptional that she had to be meticulously careful with every edit, lest she be the one to ruin it. With that thought stealing her resolve, she bent over the arrangement and continued her work with an intense, unwavering focus. A quiet certainty settled over Hae-in Shin. Her signature, long afternoon musical style was precisely what the producer and his audience truly wanted. Bolstered by this conviction, she confidently took her place at the studio keyboard, her fingers beginning to move as she actively rearranged the proposed track. The producer watched her work, his internal surprise quickly blossoming into admiration. While he had known of her influences, he was now genuinely impressed by her practical skill, witnessing firsthand her deft ability to reshape the music in that specific style. As the producer watched, a quiet awe dawned on him. He realized this was not a simple adjustment. Hae-in was fundamentally reshaping the song, weaving it into her own unique musical style while miraculously preserving its very core. He stood in silent observation as she remained completely focused on her work at the studio computer, lost in a world of her own. Finally, overcome with admiration and breaking the intense silence of her creative process, he offered to get her a beer. As one creative endeavor neared its peak, another ground to a halt. In the studio, a producer's voice encouraged Hae-in to write the first verse, but she was driven, declaring with conviction her intent to complete the song's entire arrangement that very day. Elsewhere, Lee Yeo-un sat at his desk, locked in a losing battle with a college assignment. He read his own words with a sinking feeling, sensing his arguments were far too weak. Overwhelmed by frustration at his lack of progress, Yeo-un finally conceded he needed a break from studying. Deep in the quiet of a library, Lee Yeo-un's mind was already racing past his midterms, preoccupied with the daunting tasks of preparing for aptitude tests and attending job fairs. His concentration was suddenly broken by a soft glow from his phone. A social media notification had arrived from Hae-in, announcing something called a long afternoon listening party. A quiet wave of relief washed over him as he realized his phone was on vibrate. He had forgotten to mute it and could have easily caused a disruption. The weight of endless study pressed down on Lee Yeo-un, who sat hunched at his desk amidst towering stacks of books, a deep weariness etched into his features. Seeking a brief respite, his hand instinctively found his phone. Its screen illuminated a post that cut through the haze of exhaustion, an announcement from the artist Long Afternoon for a new singles listening party. A flicker of surprise broke through his fatigue, his eyes widening as the heavy droop in his posture was instantly replaced by a sharp, sudden alertness. With bright enthusiasm, Lee Yeo-un explained the concept of a listening party, framing it as a gathering to appreciate music together, not unlike a group watching a movie. He fondly recounted his first experience with one back in high school, a special event where the artist had even been present. Inspired by this memory, Yeo-un excitedly proposed that they should hold their own. He then connected this sudden idea to a recent social media post from the band Long Afternoon, certain it was a sign that their new song was about to be released. With great enthusiasm, Lee Yeo-un invited Shin Hae-in to his apartment for a listening party, wanting to celebrate the release of Long Afternoon's new song. Hae-in, however, playfully challenged the proposition, suggesting that such a gathering was meaningless without the artist present to provide her commentary. Yeo-un conceded her point but quickly pivoted, proposing they could still have fun together, perhaps with some drinks. Seizing upon the mention of alcohol, Hae-in teasingly accused him of just wanting an excuse to drink with her. A flustered Yeo-un could only insist defensively that his excitement for the band's new song was entirely genuine. The weight of his midterm exam finally lifted, but any relief for Lee Yeo-un was short-lived. He promptly declined a friend's invitation to a party, his gaze falling instead to the screen of his phone where a message left him visibly disheartened. With shoulders slumped in dejection, he made the lonely walk home. Later that night, the quiet of his apartment was unexpectedly broken by the doorbell. When Yeo-un answered, his eyes widened in pure shock, for there in the hallway stood Shin Hae-in, a bag of drinks in her hand. A message from Hae-in arrived, informing Lee Yeo-un that she could not attend the listening party because of a late studio session she had scheduled. Yeo-un's disappointment was clear in his reply, prompting Hae-in to offer to try and reschedule her practice. Not wanting to inconvenience her, he quickly told her not to worry, dismissing his invitation as nothing more than an impulsive idea. Despite his words, however, he internally compared his feeling of dejection to that of a sad puppy that had just been denied its walk. The matter was settled when Hae-in explained she couldn't move the session, as it had been incredibly difficult for her band members to agree on that specific date. With a gentle smile, Shin Hae-in suggested to Yeo-un that they should pick another day to drink. As friends, she reasoned, they didn't need a special occasion to get together. Instead, she proposed a new plan: they would go out right after his midterms were finished. Just then, her train arrived, and as she prepared to depart, she left him with the final, comforting assurance that another good day for it would surely come. A few days later, time had passed. With the proctor's announcement that the midterm was over, students were instructed to submit their papers. Lee Yeo-un internally reflected on how difficult his exams had been, acknowledging he still had one more assignment before he could truly relax. Just then, a friend approached, inviting him to a post-exam party with their club. Yeo-un politely declined the offer, explaining that he had to go to his part-time job. His friend urged him to skip it, but Yeo-un held firm, stating that he couldn't because he had already taken a shift off the previous week. Disappointment shadowed Lee Yeo-un as he walked alone, his mind occupied by the new song from Long Afternoon and the cancelled listening party he was supposed to have with Hae-in. Despite the setback, he resolved to enjoy the music by himself. When a friend tried to pull him toward a post-exam celebration, Yeo-un politely declined, his course set for home. He had been intentionally saving the song, a reward he planned to indulge in the moment he was back in his own space. Finally arriving, he pushed open his apartment door, only to stop in his tracks. Standing there in the hallway was Shin Hae-in, holding a bag of drinks, ready for the very listening party he thought he had lost. Seated at his desk, Lee Yeo-un vibrated with excitement, ready to experience a new musical masterpiece. He slid the headphones over his ears, preparing to immerse himself completely in the sound. Just then, a low, traitorous growl rumbled from his stomach, a stark reminder that he had skipped dinner. A new idea quickly took root, easily justified by the comforting thought of his recent paycheck. With his enthusiasm instantly shifting from melody to meal, he settled on the perfect, glorious solution, fried chicken. Intent on a quiet evening to himself, Lee Yeo-un decided to order food from the comfort of his apartment, leaving specific instructions for it to be left at his door. With his meal on the way, he stepped into the shower, reflecting with a sense of peace that today was supposed to be a good day. His moment of calm, however, was abruptly shattered by the sharp, unexpected chime of the doorbell. Confusion washed over him as the sound cut through the steam. The delivery had arrived with unusual speed, and he couldn't understand why they had rung the bell instead of simply following his request. Annoyed at the interruption he believed was a delivery, Lee Yeo-un pulled open his apartment door. His irritation instantly evaporated, replaced by stunned silence, for it was not a package on his doorstep but Shin Hae-in standing in the hallway. She met his shocked gaze and calmly explained that she had arrived for the listening party. A wave of confusion washed over Yeo-un, who could only question her sudden appearance, reminding her that she had explicitly said she had other plans and couldn't make it. Shin Hae-in arrived at Yeo-un's door, cheerfully announcing that she had finished her work early and brought drinks for their listening party. She asked if she was too late, prompting a flustered Yeo-un to reply that he had only just gotten home. It was then that Hae-in playfully pointed out he was standing there in nothing but his underwear. A look of pure shock washed over Yeo-un as he realized his state of undress. Overcome with embarrassment, he let out a scream and rushed away to put on some clothes. Just as Hae-in had guessed, Lee Yeo-un was in the shower. She waited patiently outside his apartment until the door finally opened, revealing Yeo-un with a towel in hand, still drying his damp hair. A jolt of pure shock and overwhelming joy coursed through him. She had actually, truly come to his home. Before he could even form a thought, Hae-in made her request, asking if she could borrow some of his clothes just like she had before. She then clarified her stunning intention. She wanted to shower first, before they started drinking. Just then, Shin Hae-in appeared unexpectedly in Lee Yeo-un's doorway. She broke the silence, asking if he minded her presence and confirming she had indeed come for the listening party he had invited her to. In that instant, time seemed to halt, the entire world pausing to focus on the sheer, unvoiced surprise that held Yeo-un completely still.